There's a kind of exhaustion that runs deeper than sleepless nights. It's the exhaustion of always being there for people and realizing, in the end, no one ever stays for you. You tell yourself it's kindness, that being generous, forgiving, available makes you a good person. But look closer. What if it's not kindness that drives you but fear? Fear of losing people, fear of being seen as cold, fear of being replaced. And so, you say yes, when every cell in your body wants to say no. You lend your time, your energy, your peace to people who only call when they need something. You keep helping, hoping that one day they'll see your worth. But they don't. They just see access. It starts small, a favor, a ride, a shoulder to cry on. But slowly, they build a version of you that exists only to serve their comfort. They don't see you as a person. They see you as a function. And every time you allow it, your silence teaches them how to use you better. You think staying silent makes you strong. You think being patient is the Stoic thing to do. But no, Stoicism isn't about being passive. It's about discipline, control, and self-respect. It's about knowing where your duty ends and where self-betrayal begins. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." But being good doesn't mean being used. It means standing firm in what you will and will not allow. Because the truth is this, people rarely cross your boundaries by accident. They cross them because you haven't built any. And the world, indifferent as it is, will always take from the unguarded. Every yes you give when your soul says no, that's not love. That's self-erasure. And the more you do it, the more invisible you become. You start to notice it in subtle ways. When you enter a room and no one listens, when your presence is assumed, but your absence unnoticed, when they only remember your name when something needs fixing, that's not connection, that's consumption. And yet, here you are convincing yourself that giving endlessly makes you noble. No, it makes you empty. There comes a moment quiet, bitter, undeniable, when you realize they're not mistreating you because they're cruel. They're doing it because you let them. And that's where your healing begins, not in changing them, but in building the wall you never had, the Stoic wall that guards your peace, your time, your dignity, because the world will keep taking. Until you decide you've given enough. There is a silent cost to living without boundaries. It doesn't come all at once. It leaks slowly through every compromise you make just to keep the peace. You tell yourself you're being selfless. You call it kindness, empathy, loyalty. But beneath that, something darker hides. A quiet desperation to be accepted. You fear rejection so deeply that you trade your self-respect to avoid it. You'd rather be used than be alone. You'd rather say yes and hurt yourself than say no and disappoint someone else. This is how people lose their power, not through weakness, but through misplaced goodness. They confuse compliance with compassion. They confuse silence with peace. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. It tells us that peace without integrity is just submission, that a life without boundaries isn't peaceful, it's invaded. When you fail to define what's acceptable, the world defines it for you. And the world's version of your value is often built on your convenience. People begin to measure your worth by how much they can extract from you. The more you give without question, the less they see your giving as valuable. This is the cruel paradox. The people who never say no eventually become invisible, not because they are hated, but because they are predictable. They have no edge, no limit, no self. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." If your ambition is only to please, then your worth becomes whatever others decide it is. and they will decide it cheaply. Think about it. How often have you agreed to something and immediately felt the weight of regret pressing on your chest? That's your soul trying to speak. It's whispering, "You just betrayed me again." Without boundaries, even love becomes toxic. Friendship becomes debt. Work becomes slavery. And your kindness, your most sacred strength, becomes your weapon against yourself. The Stoics warned us, if you do not control your impulses will control you. The same is true for relationships. If you do not define your limits, others will stretch them until you break. And when you finally break, they'll look at you like you've changed, as if your exhaustion is some betrayal of who you used to be. They won't understand that you were never calm. You were just compliant. This is the real cost of having no boundaries. You lose yourself inch by inch, until one day you wake up a stranger in your own life. You look around and realize you've built a world where everyone gets what they need, except you. And that's not generosity. That's self-abandonment. There's a war that happens inside you every time you want to say no but end up saying yes. It's a quiet war, unseen by others, but it drains you more than any physical labor ever could. You feel the tension in your chest before you even respond. You sense the manipulation in their tone. You know you don't want to do it, and yet you smile, nod, and agree. Why? Because somewhere, deep down, you've convinced yourself that peace is bought through compliance, that the only way to be loved is to be useful, that saying no makes you selfish. This is the root of the inner conflict, the collision between your desire for acceptance and your need for self-respect. Every time you betray yourself to maintain harmony, you reinforce a dangerous belief that your worth depends on how much discomfort you can endure for others. You call it love, but it's fear in disguise. You call it loyalty, but it's dependency in another form. The Stoics would call this what it is, a loss of sovereignty, because when your emotions rule you, when guilt dictates your choices, you've surrendered your freedom. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Yet most of us live enslaved not by chains, but by guilt. Guilt that says, you owe them. Guilt that whispers, don't upset them. Guilt that lies, good people never say no. And so, you live a double life. Outwardly calm, inwardly suffocating. You listen when you want to speak. You give when you have nothing left. You smile when your spirit is aching. You become a caretaker of everyone's comfort but your own. You manage other people's emotions while neglecting your own needs. And the tragedy is they don't even notice, because you've trained them not to. You've taught them that your silence is agreement, that your exhaustion is strength, that your availability is endless. So they keep taking, and you keep bleeding quietly, telling yourself it's okay because this is just who I am. But it's not who you are. It's who you became when you decided that self-respect was too expensive. The Stoic path demands something higher, not people-pleasing, not avoidance, but clarity, the kind that cuts through illusion like a blade, because the truth hurts. Yes, but it also frees, and the truth is this. Every time you silence your discomfort to protect someone else's feelings, you betray the one person you're supposed to protect yourself. That is not compassion. That is captivity. And the moment you see it clearly, the war inside you begins to end. There was once a man who thought kindness would save him. His name could be anyone's, maybe yours. He was the one people always called when they needed help moving, when they needed advice, when they needed someone to listen at 2 a.m. He said yes every time, not because he had the time, but because he couldn't bear the guilt of saying no. At first, it made him feel important. He liked being needed. He told himself that being useful meant being loved. But over time, he began to notice something. People only came to him in need, never in gratitude, never in respect. One day, his phone buzzed again. It was a friend, the same one who disappeared for months, only to reappear when life fell apart. The man looked at the message, tired, but still tempted to reply. He could already hear the voice in his head. Be a good person. Help them. They're struggling. But that day, something inside him hesitated, not out of bitterness but clarity. He realized he wasn't being kind, he was being used. His compassion had turned into currency, traded for the illusion of connection. He sat there in silence, staring at his phone. His hands trembled between guilt and freedom. Then, for the first time in years, he chose freedom. He didn't reply. The next day, no one noticed. No one asked if he was okay. No one thanked him for the hundreds of times he'd been there before. And that silence hurt deeply. But in that pain, a strange peace began to bloom. He saw the truth. People weren't evil. They were just conditioned to take what was freely given, and he was the one who had taught them that his boundaries didn't exist. He started to withdraw, not in anger, but in awareness. He stopped explaining himself. He stopped overcompensating for others' comfort. He began to say no, softly but firmly. At first, people didn't like it. Some called him distant. Others accused him of changing. But those words no longer pierced him, because the man who couldn't say no had finally met someone stronger within himself. The man who didn't need to be liked, to live in peace. Over time, the noise around him faded, and in that quiet, he discovered what Stoics had known all along. Kindness without boundaries is self-destruction, and peace without strength is only surrender. He built his wall not to keep love out, but to stop self-betrayal from leaking through. And when he looked back at the person he used to be, he didn't feel anger. He felt gratitude, because that naive version of himself, the one who couldn't say no, was the reason he learned what true self-respect means. Sometimes, losing people isn't a tragedy. It's the moment your soul finally comes home. The Stoics never said, let people walk over you. They said, control what you can and protect what you must. That is the essence of the Stoic wall, not a wall of pride or bitterness, but one built from clarity, discipline, and self-respect. Because when you build no wall, the world becomes a battlefield. Every voice demands your attention. Every crisis becomes your problem. And soon, you no longer live. You react. But when you build your wall, something shifts. You stop being controlled by noise. You stop chasing validation. You stop confusing compassion with self-sacrifice. This wall isn't made of anger, it's made of awareness. And it begins with one thing, clarity. Clarity. Knowing what you stand for. You cannot defend what you haven't defined. Sit with yourself and ask, what do I truly owe others? And what do I owe myself? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Boundaries are not walls of separation. They are lines of truth. When you know your principles, decisions become simple. You stop over-explaining, over-giving, over-apologizing. You act from conviction, not from fear. Clarity turns I don't know what to do into I know what's right, even if it's hard. And that is the first stone in the Stoic wall. Silence, the power of saying nothing. The second layer is silence. Not the silence of submission, but the silence of strength. You don't have to defend your boundaries with arguments. You don't have to explain your peace to those who thrive on chaos. You simply act. Senetzarot, It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Most people waste their time trying to justify their limits to those who will never respect them. Stop doing that. A Stoic doesn't shout their truth. They embody it. When someone crosses the line, you don't lecture them. You step back. You let absence speak where words no longer work. Because silence has a gravity that noise never will. It shows self-command, and command earns respect. San, detachment, freedom from the need to please. The third and hardest layer is detachment. It's learning to live without needing everyone to understand you. It's choosing peace over popularity. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. You must be willing to disappoint others to remain true to yourself." Most people fail here. They want freedom, but also constant approval. They want respect, but refuse to risk rejection. You can't have both. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care deeply but wisely. You help where it's right, not where it's demanded. You give without losing your center. When you master detachment, you finally understand. The Stoic wall isn't cold. It's calm. It doesn't block love. It filters manipulation. It doesn't isolate you. It defines you. When your wall is strong, peace returns. You begin to notice the small things: silence in the morning, time to breathe, the weight of your own thoughts. You start choosing how to respond instead of reacting out of guilt. You stop living on emotional autopilot, and the world begins to respect you differently. Not because it suddenly became kinder, but because your energy no longer leaks where it shouldn't. The Stoic wall is not built in a day. It's built every time you say no without apology. Every time you walk away from disrespect. Every time you choose your peace over their approval. That is what it means to live as your own fortress, unshaken, self-governed, and finally free. Many people misunderstand strength. They think being firm means being cold. They think saying no means you've stopped caring. But the truth is the opposite. Boundaries aren't built from hatred. They're built from love. Love for peace. Love for truth. Love for the part of you that's tired of being treated like an option. When a Stoic draws the line, it's not out of revenge, it's out of respect. They understand that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of order, and order begins when you stop allowing chaos to disguise itself as kindness. You can still be compassionate and say no. You can still be gentle while being firm. You can still love people deeply without letting them consume you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And that is the essence of the Stoic wall. You don't need to fight or punish those who crossed your boundaries. You just stop giving them access to the parts of you they once abused. That's not cruelty. That's maturity. Strength isn't measured by how much you can tolerate, but by how calmly you can enforce your limits. It's refusing to let someone's chaos rewrite your peace. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop begging for respect, people start offering it. Because your silence carries weight. Your absence creates space. Your boundaries become language, the kind that doesn't need words. Sunu. Strength doesn't mean closing your heart. It means opening your eyes. It means choosing honesty over approval. It means realizing that protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish. It makes you responsible. The Stoic doesn't harden his heart. He fortifies his soul. He loves. But wisely, he helps. But consciously, he walks through the world with open hands, not open wounds. And when others mistake your peace for pride, let them. You owe no explanation for a life lived in balance, because strength, when guided by wisdom, becomes compassion in its purest form. There comes a moment usually in silence, when you realize you've been building walls all along. But most of them weren't to protect your peace, they were to protect your fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing people who were never really yours. The Stoic wall is different. It isn't made of bitterness or pride. It's built from truth. It's the quiet decision to stop giving your energy to what drains you, to stop explaining your worth to those committed to misunderstanding it, to stop waiting for people to value you and start living as if you already do. Ask yourself, who am I allowing to cross the lines I never had the courage to draw? Who am I sacrificing my peace for, and why? The answer may hurt, but it will also free you, because healing begins when you see that your kindness has never been the problem. Your lack of boundaries has. You don't need to stop loving. You need to start loving with awareness. You don't need to stop caring. You need to stop caring more than those you care for. The Stoic wall isn't something you build once and forget. It's a daily practice, a conscious act of choosing yourself without apology. Each morning you rise. You decide again, my peace is not for sale. My silence is not weakness. My boundaries are not walls against others. They are walls around my soul. Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength doesn't roar. It doesn't seek revenge or recognition. It simply stands calm, grounded, immovable. So, build your wall, quietly. Let it be made of understanding, not resentment. Let it protect your inner stillness, not your ego. Because one day, when the world pulls at you again with demands, guilt, and noise, you'll stand there, unshaken, and you'll know they can only use you if you open the gate. The wall was never to keep them out. It was to keep you whole.